The meeting's canceled due to a lack of a quorum. We will turn it over to staff, and town manager, Mr. John Hosey, will still do his survey.
Let me just clarify, quorum present here in this location.
Correct.
Correct.
We have a number of people online, but we have a requirement to have so many here
Correct.
in this location.
4 present, and I'm not included.
Correct. So, so this is not a meeting. This is not a formal meeting of the town council. However, this is still a public presentation of the results to the community survey from 2022. I will make just a general announcement that the a business item that was to be covered under the special meeting tonight, we will move to the regular meeting agenda. The reason being the sense of urgency has gone away. That piece of legislation on both sides, the House and Senate, has been tabled for the year. Doesn't mean it's gone completely. It's going to be going to the Housing Committee, and it'll be other work, and we might see it again. So it's still worth discussing. It was just not, the sense of urgency is not there. And so we will move it to the meeting, the regular meeting, and we'll discuss it at that time.
Did you say it was tabled for the year?
Yes, it's been moved off the calendar and moved and sent to committee, to a housing committee for study and recommendation, So with that said, I'd like to welcome everybody to the presentation of our community survey results. I'm very excited that to be doing this for the second year in a row, and we actually had better turnout this year than last. Last year we had 442 surveys, which is significant for a town of 1,000. This year we had 10 more. We had 452 surveys this year. Of those surveys, also I just would like to say for anybody watching on Facebook, all of this is on the website. So if anybody wants to follow along, you can go to the website and pull it up. For anybody here, there's copies in the back. As I said, we have 452 surveys. Of those, 260 were received electronically, and 192 were paper. So about 57% electronic and about 43% paper. So about last year, we were kind of about 50-50 last year as well. The first question, so one of the things we're trying to do with these community surveys is get some information tracked over time. So some of the questions will be the same every year, so we can get trend data and follow demographics. This is one of those questions. The first few questions are like that. The first one asks about where you're from, whether you're a full-time resident, whether you just reside in Northampton County, whether you own property here but live somewhere else, etc. We did add an additional category this year that we did not have last year, and that was the second one. The second one was full-time resident that lives within the corporate limits of Cape Charles, but also owns other property within the corporate limits of Cape Charles. So if you want to get the total number of full-time residents that responded, you have to add the top two together. So if you add those top two together, the total number of full-time residents that responded was about 50%. So 49.8% of the respondents were considered full-time residents, followed very closely here by those that own property in town but live somewhere else. That was 42.5%. Interestingly, the full-time resident number percentage went up slightly from last year. Last year, we had 48.9%, almost 49%. This year, we have almost 50%. So actually about 1% more full-time residents responded, and correspondingly about 1% less of people who own property here but live somewhere else. Oops, right. On question number 2, trying to find out what is the length of residency here, and pretty evenly dispersed over all those periods, similar to last year. However, when compared to last year, probably not surprising to many, we saw a reduction of some of the long-time residents and an increase in short-time short-term residents. So in the category of more than 20 years, last year we were at 14.3%, and this year we were down to 11.3%. Same thing with the 18 to 20-year residents. That was at 12.7 last year, and this year it's down to 11.5. That's down 1%. Correspondingly, on the other side, 1 to 2 year residents is up. That was only 12% last year, and it's over 16% this year. So that's kind of what we're seeing, which I think most people would have expected. Question 3, we want to know how many people owned a business, and just to get a sense for how, who's responding. Another reason for doing this is SurveyMonkey gives us the ability to sort data in any number of ways. So if we wanted to see, just what the business community thought, we could sort based on that, and that's one of the reasons we asked this question. About 11% responded that they did. Interestingly, that's a significant decrease from last year. Last year we had 19% people say they owned a business. So I don't know if it's just a different group of people who are responding this year, but it was an interesting reduction. Question 4 was a question about being employed, full-time employment. And as I think most of us would suspect, we're becoming more and more of a retirement community. We have 46% say that they're working full-time, 43% saying that they're retired. And that number, and those numbers are moving from last year. Last year we had 52, almost 53% say they were full-time. This year that's down to 46. Last year we had only 37% say they were retired. This year it's up to 43. So we are moving more towards a 50-50 split between full-time workers and retirees. Under question 5, is of those that are working, is your employment based primarily from your home? And we had about 18.5% say that it was, which is down from last year. Last year it was 21.5%. I can only speculate that perhaps last year we still had some residual COVID people still working from home, and as COVID's kind of moving on, people may be drifting back to work. But that was a similar response. Question 6. Do you think town public services are appropriate for a community of our size? We had 78, almost 79% say that it was. It was similar last year. We were rated about 80, 81% last year approval. However, when you read through the comments, and I will say that we got a significant number of comments, like we did last year, over 45 pages of very small print comments. So that's a lot for the average person to go through. So that's why we developed this summary, just kind of general trends of comments, just boiled that down to 2 pages of summaries. Now, the mayor and council have got every comment verbatim, and it's in their binders, and they'll be sorting through that over the next week. But I'll just brief generally what we gleaned from those comments. So from question 6, although the majority of folks supported the town services and thought that they were appropriate, there was 2 main takeaways. One was that a fair number of people wanted recycling, better recycling options. 23 responses towards that. If you recall, we had a similar question last year where it came in pretty even whether we were going to implement recycling. And then actually I was a little surprised at this one. There was quite a few responses saying that we need more town staff, that right now services are adequate, but that we're going to need more staff to keep up with demand, primarily in Public Works and the Police Department. Question 7, so the first question was on quantity. This one was in quality. So are you satisfied with the quality of town services? And over 82% are satisfied, which is almost identical to last year. We had 82% satisfied last year as well. Of the negative comments, or of those that were dissatisfied with services, the number one dissatisfaction, same as last year, was water quality. The other was better beach maintenance. Question 8, we asked this last year as well. Do you feel that the town has maintained or improved its small-town character in recent years? Fairly strong support in the positive here. 87% thought that we did maintain or improve our small-town character. That's compares to about 84% last year. However, there are quite a few comments here that indicated yes, but. And the but was that they feel we've done a good job maintaining it, but that we're on the verge of losing it. And the concerns that were most prevalent was a overemphasis on tourism was a common theme, but the single most common concern or threat to our small town character is the number of short-term rentals we have in town. We had 17 responses that noted that. Question 9. Question 9 asked the public to help us prioritize our workload. In hindsight, I wish we had done a little better job in constructing the survey here, because we had 2 prioritization questions on this survey, and I think they may have been a little confusing to some. Question 9 was asking to prioritize our workload. Then we had another one, question 11, that was asking us to prioritize our capital projects. Essentially, prioritize our time and prioritize our dollars. The comments that we got, people, there were a lot of comments that came in for question 9 that were better suited for question 11 and vice versa. So, there's any number of ways of presenting data like this. When you have all these choices and they're rank ordering them any number of ways, there's a lot of legitimate ways that you can pull out an overall priority. For purposes of this presentation, I chose to just list everyone's first choice. So if you take all of the first choices and then see what got the most first choices, what got the second most choices, and so on, if that's what you use, the number one priority from the options listed was to develop a beachfront master plan. The number 2 priority was to develop harbor railroad master plan. The third one was to develop short-term rental regulations, and the fourth one was to develop an overall parking strategy. Interestingly, though, that result surprised me a little bit. So I did dig deeper into the data and tried to look at data from just the full-time residents. If you just referenced full-time just the surveys from full-time residents, the priorities shift. If you look at just that category, the number one priority becomes develop short-term rental regulations. So then everything else stays the same and just shifts down one. So short-term rental regulations move to number 1, then beachfront master plan, then harbor railroad area master plan, then parking strategies. So I thought that was an interesting outcome. Regarding the other category, it was all over the place. I mean, there were lots of great ideas. I mean, but not a lot of consensus. You know, there's a lot of different things out there, but not a lot pulled together. The things that there was consensus on, that was fairly strong consensus, was for workforce housing, 14 responses, to develop better restrooms, 5 responses, and to pursue a new town hall, 4 responses. All 3 of those things the town's already working on. So those things were not in the survey because we're already doing them. So it was kind of comforting to see that the work that we've already prioritized and are already doing were the next things that the public wanted after what we listed. Question. Oh, I'm sorry. This is just question. This just shows question 9 again, with just the full-time residence data. Question 10. This was a statement regarding economic diversity for the town. I'll just read it. The town council believes that Cape Charles should strive to have a healthy mix of economic sectors, which includes tourism-related businesses, commercial/service-oriented businesses, manufacturing/light industrial-type businesses, and other businesses associated with a working harbor. As we begin to develop our master planning/zoning for the old railroad area, the town council wishes to be sensitive to implications of future development might have on our existing working harbor. For example, if we bring in high-end residential or tourism-related uses too close to the harbor, it could potentially drive out our traditional harbor uses like watermen, eroding economic diversity. Do you agree with the council's view regarding maintenance of economic diversity? Very strong support for that concept. 87%, over 87% agreed with that pretty strongly. Of those that did push back, there was a number that disagreed with the overall premise. The premise being that if you bring high-end residential or tourism too close to the harbor, that it would drive out traditional uses. And there was a number of people who disputed that and said that they could coexist. There were 11 responses in that general area. Interesting, though, another comment that was pretty common that I thought was very appropriate and worth mentioning is that while they agreed with this statement, they also expressed concern that it goes both ways. We don't want to put things out there that's going to hurt the working harbor. However, they don't want us to put things in the working harbor that's going to hurt what we already have. It's a two-way street. So I thought that was an interesting and appropriate comment. There was 9 responses that offered that sentiment. Question 11 was the other prioritization question. This one was on projects. Not surprisingly, based on question number 9, the number 1 project came out to be renovate the beachfront. So obviously, we have to do the master plan first. We would do that first, and then when it came time to spending dollars, implementing that master plan was number 1. Then was, the next priority was to assist with sidewalk infill. The third one was to install new harbor amenities, and the fourth one was to create a potential new recreational park. Interestingly, when you look at just full-time residents, didn't change anything. It was the same. If you took, and I even took one deeper, if you added everyone's first and second choice together, it didn't change the priority. It stayed the same. So this one's pretty solid, that this is what the community wants and the order of priority that the community wants. Going to the other category, again, a lot of different things out there, very little consensus. Of the things that did have some multiple comments, the largest was additional parking, 7 responses, better restrooms, 3 responses, improved appearance to the entrance corridor on Stone Road, 3 responses, and then development of a dog park or dog beach, 3 responses. Question 12 was the same question we asked last year. You know, how do you stay in touch with what's going on in town? Very similar to last year, except that we did change the categories slightly. Last year, we had one category that was just called blogs. That was meant to capture all electronic sources of information, like Cape Charles happenings, like the Mirror, that sort of thing. I don't think people understood what that was. So this year we broke them out and actually said, you know, what are they? But number one, both last year and this year, was word of mouth. That's what people get first. Number two, both last year and this year, is Facebook. Then number three is where it changed, because number three this year was the Mirror, the Cape Charles happenings. That was number 3. We didn't have that last year. Number 4 was the town website, and then the 5th one was the Gazette we put out. So that is that's the long and short of the survey results. Again, this is not meant to be a discussion. This is just a presentation. The town council has all of the comments in their binder that they can review. They have a week to do that. We will be using this data next week. We have a work session next week to review our strategic plan update, and that, as a reminder, is what we will be using as our implementation tool to implement our new comp plan. So we'll be truing up the strategic plan with the comp plan and referencing this data and setting what the goals are in the strategic plan and what my workload's going to be for the next year. So we'll be working on that next week in work session. The public's welcome to attend, although there will be no public participation. It's just a work session. Because we want to give the public time to weigh in on this, I'll put together all the input or all the guidance I get from the council next week on these documents, and we'll put it out there for public review. And then we're going to request a public input session on the first Thursday of March 2nd. We were going to be meeting March 2nd anyway because we have our annual healthcare presentation, and that there will also be a special meeting associated with that because you also need to pick one of the healthcare options that night. So what I'm proposing is that we reserve the beginning of that meeting a public input session, essentially a mini town hall, where it's a back and forth. You know, so we're not just they're just going to come up and speak for 3 minutes. We'll have a back and forth with you on what you think of the strategic plan update or the town's priorities for the year, and then council will have the option of adopting it that night if there's no significant issues with it. The goal of getting all that done in early March is that then I can use that, my department heads can use that to start developing the budget, which has to happen in March for May or June adoption. So that's kind of how we've got things laid out going forward. Any questions?
I have one question. With regards to what's posted, are the comments from individuals posted also in addition to the...
No, we didn't do that last year either. I mean, they're available. If somebody wants them, we'll certainly provide them. But
Okay, so if somebody wants them, they
yes,
can write in.
it's public information, yes.
Good.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. I have read through all the comments once quickly, which took a while.
Yes.
But there seems to be a fair amount of misunderstanding. Obviously, the 9 and 11 questions seemed a little misunderstood, but a lot of the comments made about any of the other ones oftentimes seem uninformed. It's an opinion or, not based in fact. And I'm just wondering if there's any merit that we look at the maybe certain categories of comments where we got a fair number of the similar type comment that where there's obviously a number of people that misunderstand what it is, whether it's water, whether it's sewer, whether it's, the beach, whether it could be any number of things. But again, there's a lot of comments. It'll take some work to get some categories of that, but it seems to me that like a frequently asked questions or something that might be good to,
Yes.
say, these are common misconceptions based on results we've seen, and we'd like to provide the answer as we see it or as it actually is.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I was going to mention that, and I forgot. I've already talked about that with staff. Yes. What we intend to do is try to draw some common misconceptions as points for education, and we'll develop a little education piece on that and start publishing that in the Gazette, so that we have it and can reference back to it. So that if it ever comes back again, someone has a question, we can easily reference back to that little education piece. So yes, thanks for mentioning that. I meant to mention that, and I forgot to.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. If there's no other questions, we're done for the night.
Any other questions?
Are you allowing questions from the audience?
Yes.
Susan Hudson, Bakery.
Mm-hmm.
Since you have tabled the short-term rentals that you were going to discuss tonight, when do you plan to begin that discussion? And when are you going to let us know so that we could be a part of that discussion? We have started our committee for short-term rentals in Bakery, and we'd like to be able to work together with the town on that short-term rental. So what is your plan? What are you going to do to
Sure.
get this going?
So I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, we are deferring tonight's business until the regular meeting on February 16th. So on February 16th, we will cover what we were going to cover tonight.
Okay?
Once the council sets the priorities, which I assume there's a high probability that the council will set short-term rental regulation somewhere in the work priority. Once we get to that, then we'll talk about how we're going to implement that. And my recommendation will be that we put together a working group of folks to look at that will have representation from several areas, perhaps from council, from the planning commission, from the homeowners association that does that. So we have several groups working together, perhaps a civic league, I don't know yet. We could have a working group put together to come up with some working recommendations, and then it would eventually go to the planning commission first, because I'm sure that it will be in the zoning realm. So it'll work through the planning commission process, and then once they get a recommendation, it'll move up to the town council. So it'll be a lot of process involved, and we'll notify the public throughout all of it.
Yeah, in the Vacation Association group, that there's a fair amount, I think over 100 members are working on something to bring in to work with the town.
They met with me yesterday.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
they're working
coming from all different directions.
proactively to come up with what's called a good neighbor program, to kind of self-regulate some of the impacts that are going on. So kudos to them for doing that.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
Can make a little announcement. It's this weekend. The Knight Family Foundation is inviting everybody to the Palace Theater. They have 3 showings of King Richard inspired by Serena Venus Williams. They're $10 donation at the door, and the proceeds are going to go to, most of it's going to go to the Rosenwald School for renovations, and I'm not sure what the other nonprofit is, but they're going to have showings tomorrow at 7 p.m. and then Saturday 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. This is all for Black History Month. Just kick it off.
All right, well, then, thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.